Hey guys, this is Savannah from earthandwater.co. Today I'm with Andrea Hunt, personal empowerment coach and EFT trainer. But I didn't do very well, good notes on that one. I was just copying and pasting EFT for a better life, which is awesome because she's going to teach us how to live all of our dreams by becoming nomads and digital nomads. That's what I've wanted to do forever. And you know what? I've started implementing it a little bit because it's funny how things work. You have an idea in your head and you're like, man, I would love to do that. And then things don't pan out the way that you expect them to or want them to. And then if you can, I'm not sure how like into manifestation and the magic with the K stuff. But if they tell us that one of the steps is to let go of
Mm-hmm.
direction and getting the thing that we think we want. And then, so if you really let go of it, I have woken up here on the other side of it. I'm like, I'm actually doing this in a way, not like not in the grand schemes, because, we see on people on Instagram and online, they're traveling Europe and living in or staying in castles and, just living the absolute dream. And we're over here daydreaming about that. Man, I wish I could go overseas and do those things. But here I am. I'm camping like every weekend with my laptop. So I'm still
Amazing.
doing it. It just looks a lot different than that, but it's beautiful in its own way. And I love every minute of it. And maybe one day we'll get across seas and be able to do it over there too.
Absolutely. And things just happen naturally. I think it's such a difficult thing to balance, like intention and letting go, being like putting the intention out there, but then being like, okay, how do I just be so I can see what kind of comes of this, idea and manifestation.
Yeah, definitely, because you have to do that whole inspired action thing. And if you
Yes.
are trying to steer yourself in a specific direction, but also not putting all of your eggs in the same basket, it's a very delicate balance for sure. How did you end up here? How did you end up doing all of this?
As a coach, so actually, like, I've always been into personal growth. I shouldn't say always, but let's say like the last 15 years, just mostly because like I wanted to heal some of my own, patterns and childhood things and stuff like that. And so I've, go to all these workshops and stuff like that. And I was like, man, this is like, I love being able to do this and feel empowered. And the more that I went on, I was like, this would be like a really good job for me. Like my background is communications, like I did journalism, I did um my master's is in communications as well. And so like I've always been kind of a people person. I've always been very interested in people's stories and like, being the person in the, who's the friend that's like, yeah, you should totally do that, like the motivator. And so during the pandemic, like many people, I unfortunately got laid off from my job. And the thing is, it was the second time in 6 months. And so like this is the crazy story is like I was working at this job doing content marketing, and it was like an immuno-oncology company that was doing different kind of software for tissue analysis. Great job. I loved my colleagues. I loved my life. Everything's going fine. But the parent company decided that they wanted to dissolve 4 of the departments, and I was in one of them. So that was basically one day to the other. And we're like, okay, now we don't have jobs, and at least like I was really lucky. I got offered another job right away. Like, and I thought like, man, this was an opportunity that I could have tried to take my life in a different direction. Because if I'm honest, like that job was absolutely wonderful, but like, was it my purpose? Was it my passion? Was it something that I was like really, living for? And so I thought about like kind of getting into coaching, but I was like, no, no, no. And I took like the safe route. I got the job offer. I was like, nope, don't rock the boat. Just do it. I had all the imposter syndrome and like, negative self-talk. You don't know what you're doing. You can't do that, whatever. So I got the other job. That was January 2020. Okay, so do the math here. Suddenly the pandemic came. I was working, like really, really hard during that time. But then at the end of the probationary period, me and then several other people, they were just like, sorry, we have no idea what's happening. Germany had just gotten out of the first lockdown. We were going into the second one several months later. And so a lot of companies panicked. And so they didn't want to keep on these people if they weren't sure what was happening with the direction of the company. So then I found myself twice in 6 months. I was like, okay, what is going on here? Like, what are the odds of this? First of all, like universe, like, come on. But then I started thinking about, okay, like what am I supposed to be learning from this? And so at that moment, like I kind of had like a door open. I was like, well, I really am in control of deciding what I'm going to do with my life. Yes, I could do the safe thing, which is what, like, just grab another job right away if I can find it. Or I can use this time, because like I said, we were going back into lockdown, to actually get trained as a coach and, do EFT tapping and everything. So that's the route that I took, during lockdown. Like, instead of, binging on Netflix, I was doing coaching courses. And the only benefit of lockdown was that everything was online then. So my coaching course was in the UK, because I'm in Germany, and I wanted an English speaking one, because I'm like, if I'm going to coach, I have to start in English, baby steps. And so so I did that. And so EFT tapping is something that I had been doing on myself for like 10 years. I found it as a way to manage anxiety, manage stress, like just manage my emotional health. And so I hadn't planned on using EFT and like integrating it into the coaching until like I would be coaching somebody, and things would come up, like resistance, negative self-talk, self-esteem issues and limiting beliefs. And there's only so far that you can go with just talking about them and making the intention. Because a lot of times, like, you might want something, but your body and like your fears are like, no. And then you resist, and you self-sabotage. And I was like, man, I'm like, we could use EFT for this, but I wasn't trained yet. So I went and got that certification. And so now that's how I integrated those two things of transformational coaching and EFT. And because I'm working from my laptop, I mean, like, I'm based in Germany most of the time, but I also am in Spain in the winter, and I can go different places and be a digital nomad. So I'm kind of an expat nomad now. That's the short
awesome. So you're from the States originally, right?
Yep, I'm from Minnesota originally.
Minnesota. And then
Yep.
how many years have you been living abroad?
I moved to China in 2006.
That's awesome. What,
Yeah.
was that an easy choice? Was it scary?
So it's a funny story. Like, I took Chinese classes as a kid. I was a, very curious kid, very interesting in language. And so my parents were like, well, if you want to go to China, you should start taking Chinese classes. I don't think that they ever expected me to be like, well, yes, I do want it. And so I started taking them as a kid. In Minnesota, we have Concordia languages camps. So I went to Chinese camp every year. So I had always wanted to go to China. And it wasn't until like I finished my university. I had a boyfriend at the time. Things were very rocky. And when I went to go travel in South America for a few months, things kind of completely deteriorated for a multitude of reasons. So then suddenly, like, this whole, I had this whole open space of like, what am I going to do? Because I was not in a good place with the breakup. And sometimes those feelings where you have the rug completely pulled out from under you also give you the option to be like, okay, so what am I going to do now? And so I had met this girl in Bolivia at my hostel as we're eating pancakes. And she's telling me about how she taught English in Korea. She was like from Missouri. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not a teacher. Like, my degree is in journalism. Like, I can't do that. And she's like, no, I'm pretty sure like most places you just need a college degree. And so my idea was, yeah, maybe I'll just go teach English for a few months or something until this breakup whole thing like subsides. And it was one of those moments where, because I was just in a very difficult spot, I was like, I need something new, and I need to be brave about it, because I don't want to stay here. I was in Athens, Georgia, and I was like, everything reminds me of this relationship. Like, I just need to go do something different. And doing that and getting outside of my comfort zone was one of the most terrifying things. I mean, moving to China, like, I didn't know anybody. I didn't speak Chinese then. But it was actually one of the best things that I ever did. It completely changed the course of my life. I ended up in Germany as a result of it. And I ended up working for like the radio in China, and I had like a job at different companies, like as a journalist. So it was amazing. But that's how I ended up not going back to the US. I ended up in Germany. So life works out in very funny ways.
Yeah, I've always wanted to travel. I always thought I would travel. That's the thing. Like, I grew up. It's funny that you said that it was in Athens, Georgia, because I'm in Athens, Alabama. So,
How are you?
so not only next door to that, but the same city name. That's really cool. Synchronicities, right? But I have I was born and raised here my whole life. My grandparents went to the same school that I went to, right?
Wow.
Yeah, we know everybody. And I hated it. I hated that I knew everybody for a multitude of reasons that we're not going to get into. But I spent my entire childhood just counting down the days until I hit 18 so that I could travel. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care, but I was going all of the places. I really wanted to go. Venice is my top. Venice and
Oh,
Egypt. I want to go to Venice before it sinks, and I want to go to Egypt and just see the pyramids. And then
absolutely.
those are my top two. And then Rome, all of man, that's all I wanted. And then I messed up and fell in love. And so I never left. I've been right here ever since,
Okay.
living vicariously through all of you guys who do this and share it with us online. So I think that's super cool. How many languages do you speak?
Two fluently, English and Spanish, and then I studied in Italy and Argentina. So I learned Italian as well in my undergrad. And then sorry, the Argentina part is not connected to the Italian part, but it was in that same year that I went. So sorry. And then I went to China, and then I studied Chinese when I was there. It's been a while. It's pretty rusty right now because I haven't really spoken in about 10 years. And then my German is decent. I don't know, people tell me it's better than I think it is, but I'm not satisfied with my level of German. But I'm learning to do EFT in German. That's my goal for this year. Like I'm gonna do it.
Um, I only speak English really, but I took 3 years of Spanish, maybe four, and came out with like the vocabulary of a 2-year-old. And then
Yeah.
I was gonna get Rosetta Stone back when Rosetta Stone was like the only thing that you did via, self-study and whatnot. And I was gonna get Spanish because I was like, I gotta get this down. And my friend talked me into doing French. I was I don't know why I needed that, but she was like, no, let's learn French together. And I was like, but that makes no sense. And she was like, French. And I was, no,
Especially
that
in the
makes
US, like I mean, if you were in Canada, French makes more sense, but in the US, like 30% of the population or something speaks Spanish. So it's like it's a
exactly,
useful language, right?
exactly. But she was like, French. And eventually I was like, okay, because, I don't know. So I know probably more French than I do Spanish, which makes no sense to me or anything, but it all gets really boggled in my head because it's all Latin based. And then we took Taekwondo classes, me and my children, for a little while, and the instructor was teaching us Korean. So that was cool too. I love languages. I think they're so cool, and I talk about them in almost every episode. So I just had to touch on that for a second. But tell us about EFT because I've built my entire platform on managing stress and anxiety and overwhelm, mental health type stuff. And EFT was something that helped me a lot. I don't know much about it at all. I just know that tapping in certain places, it releases energy and gets the energy moving and helps release those emotions and stuff. Tell us about that, how we could integrate some of that.
So yeah, I mean, basically, like, so there's two main ways that you can use EFT. So I'll tell you about. So the first one is like for emotional health. So everything that you just mentioned, like with stress, anxiety, worry, anger, sadness, whenever you need to kind of regulate your emotions and like connect your kind of calm down your body from whatever emotional reaction that you're having. And then the other one is more belief based. So like the way that it works is basically when you have energy systems and you have acupuncture points all over your body. So
Right.
for the purposes of EFT, it stands for the emotional freedom technique. So you just basically tap lightly, and it sounds really funny, but it sends a signal to the brain to stop the fight, flight, freeze response, calm down. And it's something that like it used to be kind of considered more like woo woo. And then now like they've done all of these scientific studies and like these research programs and found that like they can use it in clinical settings for things like PTSD, like different traumas, phobias. And so while I don't deal specifically with traumas, what I deal with are the belief parts. And so like this is the part that I wanted to talk about more. Because like the first component is like managing your emotional health, because when you're not regulating your emotions and your body's response to them, then you're all over the place. You're more reactive, you're explosive, you're getting triggered, and all of these things instead of responding in like from a grounded place. And so that's one of the things, the key things that I work on first. And then the second part, which I find really fascinating, is how you can use EFT for beliefs that you have. And so, like, we grow up over the course of our lives, acquiring these little beliefs from what we were told, from our parents, from society, the way we're supposed to be, the way we're not supposed to be, expectations, all these things, and of course, our experiences. And so the problem with like the beliefs that we create from these experiences, like a lot of times they come from when we were kids. So we don't even know any better. We're just kind of learning, right? And absorbing things. So one of the best examples that I always give is like, if you are 8 years old and let's say you've got like, you have to go read your paper in front of the class or something. And let's say the teacher insults your paper, tells you that it's horrible. Everybody laughs at you in the class. You're humiliated. So in that moment, you just learned it's not safe to be seen. It's not safe. They're all going to laugh at me, criticize me, and I'm not good at putting myself out, because you just learned that, the needle, or it's not the needle, sorry, like it's the nail that sticks out gets hit. That's what they say in China. And
Oh,
it's like, once you learn that, it's really hard to kind of step out of that comfort zone and take risks moving forward, because your body's energy system is like, I remember that was not safe. That felt awful. And so then moving forward, any situation that you perceive that looks or feels like that, you're going to still have that reaction in your body. And this is where EFT is really interesting, because of course, if you've learned that as a kid, and then let's say you have like a client presentation at work, and like, you're supposed to be the one giving, the PowerPoint or whatever. And before that, you're like anxious and sweaty, and you're, maybe you call in sick because you self-sabotage yourself. So it's like, even if you have, prepared and you want to do a really great job, you have all of this fear and resistance inside of you. And so this is really where EFT comes into play here, because then you can go through all these, through the negative round, where you acknowledge all of your fears, your resistance, and all of your thoughts and feelings about it. And so this is the part that normally we don't allow ourselves to kind of articulate and feel this, because we're like, no, I've got this. Like, it's fine. It's fine. I can handle it. And inside your brain is like, it is not fine. And so your body, you're sweating, you're all tense and everything. Maybe you have a knot in your stomach. And so this is where with EFT, by actually articulating it, and like I tell my clients, just, all right, what are you feeling? Be like, I am terrified. Like, I am so scared. They're all going to laugh at me. I'm worried about this and that and whatever. And there's something about that process of like tapping on the acupuncture points as you're articulating this, and you just go through everything you possibly think of. Why did my boss make me do this? I can't hate him. That you release those negative emotions surrounding that topic, and you release the emotional charge, so that then when you go to a positive round, then you can, it's like kind of putting on positive layers after you've cleaned off the dirt, because I always say, like, you can tell yourself affirmations like, I got this and whatever, but if you haven't cleared what's like underneath, it's like polishing a dirty plate. Like you haven't like fixed the original problem. So it might like make you feel good for a while, like just to polish it, but then like afterwards, it's all going to come back. And that's where EFT is so powerful, because when we have these limiting beliefs, the negative self-talk, you can quiet it, so that then you can put the empowering parts on top. Like, I can do this. This is not the end of the world. This is not a life or death situation. Maybe I'm being all or nothing. Maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion, and being able to kind of reframe the situation so that it doesn't feel so scary anymore. And that's my favorite process in EFT, because it's just amazing having the person be like, it doesn't really feel like a big deal anymore. And like at the beginning of the session, they were like, I can't believe I have to do this, like crying and really, really upset. So
yeah, and any tools help. And tapping is a very helpful tool that I've found that helps me a lot. Some people, if you don't know, people who know me in real life are not surprised. Doing this online and whatnot, putting myself out there, it's funny that you used that example, because I flashed back instantly to a time when I had to do a presentation in front of the class in high school, and might have been middle school, and I passed out because I was so, can't do it. Can't do it. Sorry. Nope, not safe. So yeah, sweating, suddenly can't breathe, the tunnel vision, it absolutely. And doing interviews like this right here, I still sometimes, because like you can clear it out, but in a way, pieces of it are left, like remnants and whatnot. So even if I have gotten through the fear of it and it's really not that big of a deal anymore, sometimes I will start getting really sweaty and really shaky and stuff anyway, on a regular basis, like this week, and it still happens from time to time. And I think that people really need to know that there's not a certain type of people who are made for this and then certain people are not. You can't, you're like, oh well, I'm just not made for that, that's not me, I can't get in front of people. And you don't have to, but you can if you want to, no matter where you're starting out. I didn't talk, I was almost mute for like 20 years, and now I'm doing this. And that's why I do this, because I know that if I can get through it, then anybody can get through it. Because have you ever seen The Big Bang Theory?
Yeah.
Okay, Raj, you know how he can't talk to girls, and
Yeah.
but he can talk to his friends, like hush hush. That was me. I could talk to one person if I knew them. Yeah, but that I couldn't. I was mute any other time. I couldn't make words come out of my mouth. People would talk to me, and I would just. But tapping's helped a lot, and I wonder if because I'm neurodivergent also, and that has a lot to do with it. And I found that tapping helps me keep focused and calm down. And I wonder if like stimming, are you familiar with what stimming is?
I just learned that word this year actually. But yeah, apparently isn't it kind of similar? It's just like being able to find a spot that like kind of calms you by the repetition. Is that
Sort of. It's a lot of things. It can be noises that you make. It can be tapping, flapping, those types of things. It's very often notable with highly autistic who are more openly STEM but it's a self-regulation thing. It's a emotional and nervous system type regulation thing, because the world is so overwhelming and so overstimulating that it's to have a focal point, essentially, is what helps me a little bit. But yeah, tapping is definitely something that has helped with me with that for sure.
Absolutely. Because I think like one of the reasons that I found is that because I had like several exams in one week and I was so panicked that I just couldn't calm down. And like while I love meditation, if I'm in that kind of state where like I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't sit still like long enough to like, oh, let's try to like breathe and whatever. I mean, because I was just like hyperventilating. And so it was because like I found, I don't know if you know Brad Yates's EFT videos.
Nope.
But he's wonderful. He has like thousands of just like 5-10 minutes on YouTube. And so I found this one. It was like panic and fear right now, and I'm like, that's the one. That's the one I'm going to try. And so it was just kind of like starting here on the breast one, because I learned that there were different points. Like I had learned that part, but I was just like trying to be like, okay, just let's stick with one thing, and then I could follow along. And I was like, I feel better than I have in like 5 days. Like I was like I was like to the point where like I was like absolutely inconsolable, and I'm like 10 minutes later I went from a 10 to like a 9. And I was like, okay, let's just see what happens if I do it again. And so it just kept going down. Like I went from like a 9 to a 7, and I was just like, what is this sorcery? This is amazing. Like I have to do this for everything. And so that's how I found it. And even still, I mean, I'd say that most of the time, because I learned that when I started as part of my morning routine, my day is completely different in terms of just feeling centered, grounded, and calm. And also like, oh, sorry, let me finish my sentence. Then if I don't do it, like if I'm on vacation and I'm traveling with friends or people, and then I don't get to do it, and I'm like, okay, no, I really would like to tap. I want to have that centered and grounded feeling. But even like if you're on I mean, here we take the train or like the buses or something like that, and just being able, I don't know if you know the finger points, because like if you're on a bus, like you don't always want to be like you know what I mean, like just because people are like, I don't know what she's doing, that looks kind of crazy or whatever. But if you can always do it like on your knuckles, and just being able to like learn that has been really, really helpful. And I always tell.
Okay, yeah, that is helpful, because I have definitely been tapping in public, and like got some
But even
weird
if
looks.
this is like people don't really notice it because even like just the breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth while you're doing this, people don't know what you're doing. They just
It almost looks normal.
it almost looks normal, exactly. Whereas, this is like a little weirder. Like
Yeah, the face tapping though is what has probably helped me the most. And then the on the ribs underneath the
Mhm.
arms, those are
Yep.
the 2 points that help me the most because I guess like there's lots of points that you could do. And like I said, I don't have any kind of qualification. I've never read into this. I only know about EFT through doing interviews with people who, because I've been in the mental health field for years, and people love this EFT. And I have clients come to me and they're like, do you know anything about EFT? I'm like, I mean, I know a little bit, but I don't know anything. I've never read on it. I've never anything, just from what my experience, hands-on and whatnot. But I imagine you just try out a bunch of points and you find the one that works best for you, right?
Yeah,
Or
you
are there
can. I mean,
certain
like
points
the
for
rounds are
certain?
really helpful, but sometimes people, especially if they're not familiar with it, they're afraid that they're doing it wrong. And so they're so worried that they're doing it wrong that it's not helping. And so sometimes I'm like, okay, just literally just do it on your chest. Like, breathe in through your nose. That way you don't have to feel like you're, oh God, am I doing it in the wrong order or something like that? Because sometimes it can be confusing if it's your first time or something.
So there is specific recipes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a specific way that you do the rounds, but different practitioners also have different points. Like some people do like wrists or like back of the neck, for example,
That's
or
a good one.
like under the boobs area. Like it's like I don't know the specific name for that one, but like
Cool. Yeah.
you can switch it up.
It does help to clear things though. And I like how you touched on the affirmations earlier, because you're right. You can say all the affirmations in the world. They're not going to do any good if you're lying to yourself or in denial, or they're not truthful. You have to get to a place where they're truthful before they'll work. And sometimes that can be a little challenging because how can you go from this extreme to the other extreme, from like, let's say, I cannot or I can do this, for
Mhm.
example, I can do this when you really don't think you can. And historically, like, you have not, and you even passed out a couple of times trying to do this. So you can tell yourself all day long, I can do this. It's not going to make it true unless you believe it. Because then you're just
Mhm.
going to you're going to end up psyching yourself out, honestly, and you're going to get
Yeah.
up there and it's going to be worse because you were focusing on it.
Yeah.
So how do you get from I can't do this to I can do this with it being truthful? And yeah, tapping is a great way. Baby steps, honestly,
Mhm.
but then we're going off on a tangent.
But I like so what you said is really good, because you can get yourself like you don't have to go all into like I am confident, for example. But like, what was the example like that you just gave a second ago? Sorry.
I can do it. I
I
can
can
do
do it.
this.
Yeah. So like, for example, instead of just doing like launching into like I can do this, because your brain's like, you liar, you cannot.
Yeah.
You can start with phrases that are a little bit more gentle, like I'm open to the idea that I
There you
can
go.
learn to do this. I'm willing to believe that I'm learning all the time and I'm getting better every day. And I learned new things since last year, and I learned new things since 5 years ago, and I can probably learn some new things today. So you kind of like ease into it because it
I
feels
agree.
more believable than if you're just like, I'm a great public speaker. And you don't believe that when you say it, if that's always been like a hurdle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of all these places that you've lived, which one has been your favorite? Because I'm
That,
really big into cultures also.
yeah.
I'm really big into like the Western culture. I hate it. I hate everything about it. And that's another thing that I'm doing out here, is trying to like there's other ways to live that are better. And because in Spain they do that. Actually, my aunt had a foreign exchange student from Spain a couple of years ago, and I just honed in. I was like, I have so many
Tell me
questions.
more. Yeah.
Yes. And so I always come back to her story, and she told me that one of the biggest culture shocks was how we schedule things in the West. Like, everybody's just off doing their own things. Like, everybody leaves at different times, and everybody gets back at different times, and the school day is just so long, because she said that everything in Spain is really family oriented. So everybody gets up at the same time, everybody eats breakfast together, and then everybody goes off to school or work or wherever you got to go. And then around noon, everybody goes home, eats dinner or eats lunch together, takes a nap, which I think is fabulous because I have to have a nap every day.
That's a
And
great idea.
and then they go off back to school for a couple of hours or back to work for a couple of hours or whatever they do. And then they come home and everybody has dinner together. And then everybody goes out and does their evening activities together. And I was just like, that is what we need. That is what the world is supposed to be, because every one of us is drowning in overwhelm and the hustle of, not only the hustle of trying to make ends meet, honestly, but the hustle of like, oh gosh, I have to figure out what's for dinner tonight, and then I have to do laundry, and then I have to make sure that everything's cleaned up, and that's too much. Just the basic bare bones of life is too much for any one person, and people are out here beating themselves up about it when it's not their fault. And I have to reiterate this all the time. Please do not beat yourself up about it if you can't handle the basic bare bone tasks of life, because it's too much for any one person. And we need to get back to that village community aspect of doing everything together and sharing the workload as a team. So I already know I love Spain. Never been. Want
I'm
to
sure
move
you
there.
would like it though, because there's like a slower pace to it. And I think that one of the things that I really do appreciate about Europe, and this is just from having lived in different places, but they really have more of a work-life balance focus. Whereas, I don't know, like in Germany, for example, people use all of their holiday days and they're just like, all right. So like in Germany, if you have kids, they get August off. So they're like, see you guys in September. We're taking the month off. And that's completely normal.
Awesome.
And I know that my American colleagues were like, what is going on with you guys? Like, what do you mean that like, Martin left for the month, you know? And like nobody has any problem taking sick days. I mean, but it's set up very differently, because especially in Germany, what I've noticed, which is very interesting, is like it's not about how long you work. Like they want you to work smarter, not harder. So like whereas when I worked in China, everybody stayed in the office like 10 hours. It does not mean that anybody was doing anything those 10 hours. It's just that you can't really leave until the boss leaves, or it makes you look lazy and bad. So I mean, everybody's in there. But like if people are watching movies, and like also, I mean, in the US, people are like on Facebook or like doing whatever, they're on social media and not really maybe working all the time. And in Germany, they like come in, they know their responsibilities and their tasks. There's no micromanagement. They just responsibly do their stuff. They're not on social media, and then they just go home and like spend time with their families and like go on a bike ride or something like that. I was like, this is so weird. Like, but that's really amazing. So, I mean, I don't know. I think I do really appreciate that about Europe, how they prioritize that, because it was not that way, at least in the other countries that I've lived in, you know. So I do really appreciate that. And it's like it's okay to take a day off. And like people are like, yep, Friday afternoons, not coming to the office, spending time with my family, we're going to the park. Okay. So I don't know. Yeah.
That is awesome. And it's so opposite in the US. Very from a lot of directions. For when people, the norm is being afraid to take off. Uh
Mm-hmm.
Working yourself to the bone, 12-hour days, ridiculous
Mm-hmm.
shifts, family. You have to pretend you don't have one, honestly, especially
Mm-hmm.
as a woman
Yeah.
in business. You have to, because we're already seen as problematic, because they're going to want off when their kids aren't at school, and they're
Mm-hmm.
but so many other cultures are kid oriented. The US, we're only just now getting out of an era where, up until this point, and I say up until this point because I don't have like um numbers or studies that prove this, but I see people becoming, and I think COVID had a lot to do with the shift of people being more open and understanding to children being around, because
Mm-hmm.
before that, children were not only did they want the kids to be seen but not heard, but in most cases they didn't want them to be seen either. Just children were to be tucked away where they were out of the way and not an issue, whereas a lot of other cultures, it's just normal to take your kids to work with you if you need to. Not a
Mm-hmm.
big deal. And of course that depends on like the industry that they're in and whatnot, but I just find a lot of other cultures are so much more family centric and
Mm-hmm.
children oriented than ours, and that above all else is one of the things that drives me absolutely insane about the American culture. Like, there's a lot of problems with the American culture from my stance, but that is one of the biggest things, is that we sweep our children under the rug for the most part. And well, that leads to problems, because there's nothing more important in sustaining a society, a culture, a civilization than the upbringing, the future, right? The future of the civilization is the children. And if you don't give children what they need, then they turn into grown children. They're not adults. They look like adults, but they have never been taught how to regulate their emotions. They've never been given the things that they need in order to thrive. So they're damaged is a harsh word. I don't really like that word, but it's, they're not putting out into the civilization society in a productive and proper manner. And in a lot of cases, it's degrading the civilization and society. So I feel like we could solve a lot of our problems as a world society by taking from some of these other countries who are doing a better job in some areas than we are. And that requires an open mind, and a lot of people don't want to open their mind to other civilizations being better at some things than we are, but those are things you can definitely find statistics studies on.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I think that the top one you mentioned, I mean, just being a mom, I mean, like getting like 9 months off to like stay home with kids, that's like a completely normal thing in Europe. Like, nobody would expect a woman to come back to the office even after like 6 months. You know what I mean? Or they can like split it. And so like the dad stays home. Like, I had a friend who was a freelancer, and so his wife went back to work after like 6 months, and he stayed home for like a whole nother year and took care of like the little girl. And so it's just nice because it's more of like an even distribution of like the parenting, first of all, but also the kid gets to have, to get to have a relationship with both of the parents. And it's not seen as something that's like, oh, like Martin wants to stay home with his daughter. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, wow, that's great that the man is sharing the responsibility. And I think there are some areas in the US that like that could definitely be something that evolves. I mean, the time off and stuff like that, so that the kids don't have to go to daycare right away when they're babies, Because plus it's just, I mean, it must be really hard as a mom to be like, okay, I don't want to go back to work and like leave my baby with some stranger, because it's like that whole bonding period that you need.
Yeah. 6 weeks is the average.
Yeah.
6 weeks. Like, you're still healing at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. My European friends think that's insane. They think that's just like insane that's the case.
It is
Yeah,
insane.
to answer your question, I don't know, because like in culture wise, it's hard to say which one because like I love living in Germany, but I think like I have to go with you on Spain. Like I love Spain, especially I go in the winters because like it's warm, it's sunny, it's chill, people are like lively and happy. There's this, I don't know, just they're positive and happy.
Well, they get naps every day.
Yeah, I know. I mean, everybody would be in a better mood if we just all got a nap in the afternoon, right? I think like, but they have like longer work days, but they get the nap in there. So like, I don't know. I think maybe that's a good trade-off,
Yeah, I'd take it in a heartbeat.
Exactly.
Especially if we had like everybody, because I struggle with cooking a lot for a lot of reasons, a lot of things, and it's not my forte. I can clean. I'm a great sous chef. Like, I can prep some stuff. But for some reason, like, I'm not good at it. So that would take a ton of pressure off of me, a ton of stress off of me, if it was just commonplace for everybody to help feed everybody. Which makes sense, it shouldn't fall on one person anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, maybe Spain is in your future. Who knows?
Who knows? I doubt it. Anytime my husband asked me, for years and years and years, he stopped asking me actually, but every time he did ask me where I wanted to go on vacation, I'd be like, Venice, Egypt, He'd be like,
yeah,
how about something a little bit more realistic?
yeah,
And
exactly.
I'm like, look, I don't understand why it's not realistic. Okay, like because it's really not. People think people are really scared of traveling outside of their own country. They think that it's more dangerous, that the crime rates are higher elsewhere, which is funny because it's not. And then
Yeah, it's really not. I feel very safe in Europe, actually.
yeah, yeah. And then also they think that it's crazy expensive, which most places are not. Most places are a lot cheaper. I had a friend of mine whose mother moved to Italy about it was probably about 5 years ago at this point, but she bought an entire place for like $2,500 or something.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah, it
mean,
depends where. I mean, like, but I mean, Spain, there's a lot of retirees there for that reason. I mean, because like there's a lot of places that it is cheaper to buy it there and the life is cheaper. I mean, even though it's still the euro, like Germany, like the money goes farther because everything's just a bit cheaper. It's
yeah,
not dirt cheap or something like that. Like, don't misunderstand, but it's cheaper than Germany, for example.
it'd probably be like the same comparison as living in New York or LA versus living in Athens, Alabama or Athens, Georgia, right?
Yeah. Except for property, I feel like in the like in Georgia, at least, well, maybe I think it's gone up now, but I mean, in comparison to like New York, like what you get in New York City for like $5,000 a month, like a little shoebox with like,
Yep.
they had, on Instagram, they have all these feeds like, this is what you get for $5,000 in Brooklyn. And it's just like, oh my God. And then it's like over here in, I don't know, Denver or something like that. This is what you get for this amount of month. I mean, it's just crazy difference.
Yeah, it's a
But
culture shock everywhere you go. Every place in the US is completely different. I've been
Mhm.
to LA and I've never been out of the country, unfortunately. I plan to one day, maybe. My husband wants to go on cruises, and I'm like, can we? I don't like boats in the sea, but anyway, I almost got to go to Canada one time, but my mom said I had to drive to Canada from Alabama. Yeah.
I
Couldn't
feel like
take a
there's
plane.
quicker ways. I don't know. I mean,
Who
I love a
knows?
good road trip, don't get me wrong, but I think like there are quicker ways to get there.
Yeah. But I've been to LA and I've been to Louisiana, and people in other countries don't realize how big the US is. And
Yeah.
we don't realize in the US how small most other countries are. I have since I've been living online like this right here since probably 10 years ago at least, I've had friends all over the world and I've talked to them about all sorts of things. And especially when they're in other countries, because I want to know about the culture and I want to know about their
Hmm.
life. And I've had people tell me, like, it's insane that we can drive from one end of our country to the other end of our country in like 3 hours. And
Hmm.
I like to
Like
drive
Swiss.
just from one end of Alabama to, because I live in North Alabama, 5 minutes from the Tennessee line. So it takes me 5 minutes to get to Tennessee. It takes me 6.5 hours to get to the beach, which is the other end of the state, right?
Hmm.
And so the culture difference in the US is insane. And for so long, people were, there before we had the internet, your culture was developed by the people that you interacted with in person. And that's why you have uh, similarities in people from the same locations. And just chopping it up in the US is extreme. So people want to get really not so much anymore closed-minded, but they for a long time they were very closed-minded about the outsiders, right? And now that we have the internet and we're having this expansion of awareness that there are thousands of different ways to live in the world, and if we can just kind of collaborate with all of that and keep talking to one another like we do here, like, what are y'all doing about this issue? That's not an issue where you live. What, tell me
Yeah.
more. How did you solve that issue? Well, I've totally, my grandma said that wouldn't work, but maybe it will. Maybe it will. And so that's how we're creating a better future for us all, right?
Absolutely. And I think like that's one of the ways that I've just learned so much about how different things work in different countries. I mean, especially like when you're there, but like, because I mean, a lot of my friends are from all different countries. So you'll be sitting around just discussing some topic and you're like, so how is it there? Wow, is that what you guys do? Interesting. How does that work? Ah, I never thought of it like that, and there's so many ways to solve problems, but you have to be open to talking to people about their experiences and being like, okay, maybe we don't have it all figured out in this area. That sounds pretty reasonable. I like where you're going with that. So like, and But I mean, I think you have to start with the awareness that like, is this the best we can really do? Because in a lot of cases, you can always improve on things. There's no such thing in most places of like, this is absolute perfection, no room for improvement anywhere, you know, because I mean, it's always better. I mean, you can always improve anything, you know.
Yeah. A lot of times it takes us going against the grain of society and culture,
Mhm.
which is another thing I talk about a lot. It's really hard for a lot of us to make the choices that are different for our own benefit simply because of how everybody else is going to feel about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I could tell you, like, I moved to Mexico when I was 20, and this was a long time ago. This was in 98. Okay, so but like nobody thought this was a good idea. Let me just tell you that this was like before like all the internet stuff. And I didn't mention this before, but my grandmother was Mexican. So like I did like you, I took Spanish classes in high school. I could put like a string of words together, barely though, but and I was like, no, I would like to actually go learn Spanish. And so like I told my parents, like I saved up all this money, like I was working at Applebee's and then like a sports bar, right?
Oh
So
my
it
gosh, I
was
worked at Applebee's for 6 years.
did you really?
I
Yeah, I
really
worked
did.
I worked there for like I think it was 3 years because I started as a hostess and then I was a waitress. Because and so I saved up all this money and like I was like, I have to leave Minnesota. I don't know where I'm going. I know that I have to like get out of here and just see what else is there in the world. And so I went to Mexico, but I told my parents this and they're like, that's a terrible idea. You know, like why would you want to do that? All my friends were like, it's dangerous. This is gonna happen to you. This is
You're
gonna
gonna
happen.
get murdered,
Why would you do that? Yeah, like da, 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 da.
kidnapped.
And Mexico was a lot safer in that time, seriously, as well, which always kind of surprised me. And then I went to London to do volunteer work. Nobody thought that was a good idea either. He was like, and then when I told my dad I was moving to China, he was just like, I mean, my poor parents, at some point they've gotten used to it. You know, they're not really surprised, but they're just like, really, Andrea, like China? Like, on the other end of the world, like Beijing, there's like 20-25 million people there. Like, is that really what you need to do? And I was like, this is what's happening. Okay. So, um, but I think like what I've learned is if if you don't do the things that you feel that you need to do, you might also not be happy with how things are. And I didn't want to end up being like resenting my family or something for telling me no, or like, I mean, even with business things, I mean, like whatever it is in your life that you want to do, you're always going to have people. It's a good idea, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to listen to what you want, or you won't do anything because you
Mm-hmm.
can't please it.
Yeah, switching from that external validation to the internal validation is really what you have to hold on to. Definitely, I lived my life with a sense of I don't want to be on my deathbed with regret, like
Mm-hmm.
wishing that I had tried, because you don't know until you try. And you can tell yourself all day long, it's like, oh, it won't work out, it won't pan out, stuff like that. I don't get to do things like that. Well, the truth of the matter is that if there is a single person on this planet who is doing that thing that you want to do, then it is possible for you to do it as well. And you will never know if you can make it happen if you don't try to make it happen. And you got to work at it as hard as you feel called to work at it. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you can do it for 6 months and then be like, I've had my feel, I'm done. And then you can backtrack if you want to. Or you can just keep on going until the energy is spent and you don't want to anymore. But you definitely
Absolutely.
should do it.
Because it's like that. I can't remember the woman's name, but she was a nurse or something like that for like the end of life and the top 5 regrets of the dying. And one of the top ones is I didn't have the courage to live authentically, like to myself or something like that. And I just always remember like, wow, that's why my company is living deliberately today. Like did you see the Dead Poet Society with Robin Williams? Great movie. You should see it. Anyway, but it's based on there's a poem and it's just talked about like I wanted to go to the woods to live it deliberately, like yada yada yada. And then like so that at the end of my life, I did not discover that I had not lived. And I always like remember that and it struck me like it's very like what's the difference between existing and really living?
I love that so much. And I think that is a wonderful way to end this episode on that point right there. So thank you so much for being with us today and having this conversation about all the things. Tell people where they can connect with you and what you have as services to or products or whatever you have to offer.
Okay. And first of all, thank you so much for giving me the chance to be here. I have really loved our conversation. And for anybody who wants to connect with me, so www.dreahunt.com. And then I'm on social media, like on my Instagram, it's at living.deliberately.today, because that's what I want everybody to do. And this same thing on my YouTube, and then also my Facebook is Andrea Hunt, Living Deliberately Today, personal empowerment coaching. And I would love to hear from you guys.
And I will definitely link all of that around so that nobody has to look too terribly hard for it. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much. You as well.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please give us a 5-star rating on wherever you're listening to this at. Share it across your social medias, with your friends, whoever, whatever. It really helps us. I did away with the tiers in the Patreon because I don't think I want to teach yoga online anymore. The energy's just not there. It's not where my heart is at all. I cannot stand talking to my phone and trying to formulate a class, because I teach yoga by reading the room and seeing who needs what and just intuitively engaging with each individual. And I can't do that in a room with just myself. So now just $5 gets you full and complete access to everything. The yoga classes that are already up there are going to continue to be up there. I may add some in the future. Who knows? If I feel like it, I'm going to do it. And if I don't, I won't. But I will be adding meditations, and of course these podcast episodes, completely full video, unedited versions, no ads, are on there, and journaling exercises. There's stuff. Probably not yoga classes anymore though. If you want some personal Zoom yoga classes, we might could work something out there, because I could see you and interact with you and know what you need, know what you're looking for. I do much better with stuff like that rather than like, here's a episode or here's a yoga class on shoulders. You could just go to YouTube and Google that, because there's a lot of awesome people out there online who love teaching yoga online. Go support them. Come to me for other things. So anyway, tell us how you like this episode. Go follow Andrea. If EFT tapping helped you at any point, let us know the story about that. And if you know any cool cultural things that other countries do that the U.S. could really get on board with, tell us about that, because we need to do some stuff about that. Until next week, I love you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Namaste.